Get this child out of my courtroom. The gavel didn't just fall, it cracked like a pistol. Judge Merritt Holloway pointed the head of it at me like it was a baton he could use to sweep me into a corner. Somebody in the back snorted, then a cough, then chuckles, and suddenly the whole gallery rippled with ugly laughter. "Look at the suit," a man stage whispered. "He colored in his eyebrows with a pencil, too." A woman with a pearl headband didn't even bother whispering. "Who let a 9-year-old play lawyer? This is pathetic." The bailiff stepped forward, boots loud, eyes hard. "Move it, kid." I didn't move. My mother, Amara, leapt up, her hands trembling as she tried to smooth the front of her thrifted blouse. "Please. He's not. He's only trying to help. We don't have—" Silence. Holloway's voice filled every pane of wood in that room. "You will not make a spectacle of this court. Remove the child before I cite you both for contempt." Phones came out, red record lights. Someone started a slow clap, and it was the kind of clap that says, "You are beneath me." It got louder. My ears filled with heat. My tongue tasted like pennies. I wasn't tall enough to see over the podium, so I stepped 2 inches to the left where the wood dipped. I could see the judge's eyes now, small, flat, curious in the way a cat is curious about a trapped bird. My heart beat in my throat. "Your Honor," I said, steady enough to surprise myself, "I appear as next friend on behalf of Amara Ward, under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure, 17C. I ask the court to take judicial notice of emergency incapacity." The room froze. The laughter died so fast it left a hum in the air, like the quiet after someone kills a vacuum. Judge Holloway's lips parted, just a fraction. His eyes flicked from me to the bailiff to the lawyer's table where Victor Halden, landlord, suit the color of old coins, smile like a dentist drill, sat with 3 attorneys from Price, Dennison, and Lowe. They had congratulatory smirks loaded and ready, and then they didn't. No one said a word. "I'm sorry," I added, because my mother raised me to say it when I interrupted an adult, even when he was wrong. "Would you like the citation, Your Honor?" A vein twitched in Holloway's temple. What happened next wasn't just a fight about a broken apartment. It wasn't just about mold or heat or pipes older than my grandma. What happened next peeled back a piece of this city, like old wallpaper. Underneath, the wall was crawling. But if you want to understand how a 4th grader ended up anchoring his feet on the tile and telling a judge no, you have to go back 3 weeks. Back to the building where paint flaked like dandruff and the air tasted like bleach and wet socks. Back to the exact night I figured out that law is just a game with rules that rich people count on you not knowing. Maple Crest wasn't a crest, and there were no maples. There was a dead shrub that had once hoped to be a tree, but even hope gets tired. The sign out front hung at a slant. One chain snapped so long ago it had learned to love the angle. Our stairwell smelled like cigarettes and cheap detergent, and on good days, like French fries. On bad days, like the kind of wet that grows in the dark. Apartment 3D was ours. You could hear it breathing. When the wind hit right, the window above the sink whistled like a sad tea kettle. The bathroom ceiling had a brown halo that kept spreading no matter how many times Mom scrubbed it, because bleach can't kill a pipe that leaks inside a wall and pretends not to. In winter, our radiators coughed warm air like a smoker who promised to quit. People think kids don't notice. Kids notice everything. I noticed how my mother's shoes softened at the edges. I noticed the way she counted change twice before buying milk. I noticed how she put extra salt on her rice and gave me the chicken. I noticed the smell she came home with at night. Lemon cleaner, cardboard tape, something fried, and the way she went quiet in the kitchen sometimes, hands on the counter, eyes at the floor, like she was willing herself not to fall. "Dinner," she'd say, forcing brightness into the syllables like stuffing into a pillow. "Come eat, Jay." I'd be on the carpet with a chessboard and 3 library books fanned open. The lamp was missing a shade. Our table wobbled. We folded napkins and slid them under the shortest leg. A tiny surgery that never held for long. "I'm finishing this page," I'd tell her, finger tracing a paragraph about warranty of habitability, a phrase that felt like a ship I could climb aboard and sail out of this mess. I had written it on a sticky note and taped it to the wall next to other phrases. Retaliatory eviction. Constructive notice. Perjury under oath. A universe of words that turned into tools if you held them right. The books weren't mine. They'd been thrown out by the Brookfield County Law Library last summer when they updated to new editions. New edition meant same rules, fresh covers. I found them in a green dumpster behind the library with a raccoon I named Counselor. I hauled those books home in a stroller my mother had used for me when I was too small to remember. I think that stroller felt proud, carrying something heavy again. My mother didn't tell me to put them back. She's the kind of mother who notices when a seed lands in the right dirt. The night before everything started, she came home early. Early for her meant not past midnight. Her key didn't turn smoothly. The lock stuck when it was cold. She swore under her breath, laughed at herself for swearing, then called out like she always did. "It's me!" as if we had a horde of people who might think otherwise. When she stepped into the light, I knew something was wrong. She had a paper in her hand, and her mouth was trying not to shake. "What's that?" "Just a letter." She put it on the table, face down. The corner showed a strip of letterhead with the kind of serif font that feels expensive, or mean, or both. "You never put mail face down." She swallowed, as if the truth had a spine. "It's from Halden Properties." Of course it was. Victor Halden owned Maple Crest and 200 other places where people prayed their kids wouldn't get sick from the air. He drove a car that looked like a liquid coin and changed watches when the weather changed suits. He had a way of smiling that made you feel like he could see all your debts and knew exactly how long it would take for them to crush you. "Can I see?" Her fingers hesitated. Then she turned the paper over and slid it to me. I read fast, but this was the kind of letter that wanted to be read slow. Notice of claim for damages and intent to evict. $50,000 for willful destruction of property. Unsanitary conditions, and my new favorite phrase, tenant negligence resulting in structural compromise. By the time I got to the end, my mother's nose was red. Not from crying, she hadn't let herself cry yet, but from the pressure of holding it back. "They're saying we did this," she whispered. "The cracks in the living room wall, the stain in the bathroom, the radiator leak. They're saying it's all us." I pulled out the shoebox under the couch, the one with our "just in case we get lucky in a fight" paperwork. Mom saves everything, not because she's a hoarder, because she's fought a lot of small wars with trash bags and numbers on screens and winter coats that cost more than rent. Inside the box, under school certificates, and the photo of us at the county fair where we split a funnel cake and she pretended not to like it, were the pictures from the day we moved in. Not selfies, evidence. Mom makes evidence on instinct. "See?" I said, laying them side by side on the table. "This crack? It's already here. That stain? Already there. The radiator drip? You can see it under the paint." She pressed her palm to her forehead, half relief, half anger. "Jaylen, Baby, even if we have pictures, we can't afford a lawyer. I don't know if you've ever felt your body grow around an idea. It's like a lightning strike, but instead of burning you, it shows you a road that was already under your feet. We might not need one, I said. Her laugh was soft and sad. I love your faith. No, I said, and my voice was steadier than I expected. Not faith. Rules. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay down, but the kind of breathing she did wasn't the kind that turns into dreams. I sat at the table and read until the words swam, and then swam back into place. By 2 a.m., my sticky note galaxy had doubled. By 3 a.m., I had drawn 3 columns on notebook paper. Facts we can prove. Lies they will tell. Rules that beat the lies. By 4 a.m., I found it. Rule 17C. It didn't say kids can't file. It didn't say capable minors must sit down and watch their families get steamrolled. It said exactly what it said. If someone can't sue or defend because of incapacity, a next friend may do it for them. No age listed, no prohibition. Just power with a label most people never learn. I looked over at my mother's face in the dim. She had one arm over her eyes like a visor, like she was blocking a sun that only she could see. She had fallen asleep, sitting up, then slumped. I tucked a blanket around her and tucked the word incapacity into my pocket. It wasn't a trick. It was a truth. Exhaustion can be a medical emergency. Collapsing at a shift can be an incapacity. The letter in my hand had done half the work, the fear. The other half I could do with facts. Morning came in like a gray bruise. Our upstairs neighbor, Ms. Gloria, was already dragging laundry down the hall, her slippers announcing every step. "You seen this?" she asked, waving a notice of scheduled water shut-off for maintenance. The maintenance never happened. The shut-off always did. "Mom needs eggs," I told myself out loud, as if I could summon money with a plan. We had $2 in coins in a jar and some rice. Mom would tell me she wasn't hungry. Then she would watch me eat and say something about how kids need more protein than grown women, and how she would grab something at work. She never did. She grabbed air. We tried legal aid that day. I called while Mom was at her first job because I know how to spell my name and our address and say housing case with my voice deepened half an inch. I set it for 6 different intake lines. 3 were full. 2 had wait lists, in the 6 months to indefinitely range. 1 suggested a clinic that had closed due to restructuring. By the time Mom was home, she had another letter. This one said if we left quietly in 10 days and didn't fight, Halden Properties would consider the matter resolved and not pursue damages. It sounded like a favor. It felt like a trap with polite grammar. "Maybe we should sign it," Mom whispered, rubbing her temples. "If they go after the money, they'll take it out of my check forever. I can't. If they garnish Jay, I can't even buy groceries. We can stay with Auntie for a while." Auntie's house already held 6 people in 4 rooms. "If you sign, it's an admission," I said quietly. "Every background check, every apartment application, previous eviction, yes. Your credit score will cry itself to sleep. They win twice." She stared at the paper like it might give her permission to stop pretending to be strong. "What would we even do? We don't have—" "Rule 17, I said. She blinked. "What?" "Let me show you." I explained it to her the way I'd explained chess to myself. 1 move at a time, simple names, no mystic smoke. My voice stayed calm so hers could shake. When I finished, she didn't speak for a moment. Then she laughed, but not the sad laugh. The other one. The one that meant a door had cracked. "You're serious?" "Completely." Her eyes filled. She nodded like she was nodding me across a street with cars coming fast. "Okay," she whispered. "What do you need?" "Everything we have. Photos, complaints you filed, times you called, names of who said no, and I need you to drink water." "Water? You fainted last Tuesday, and you said it was because the mop room was too hot. That's not nothing. If you don't sleep, you don't fight. If you don't eat, you don't think. If we do this, I need you hydrated." She laughed that cracked door laugh again and went to the sink. The faucet groaned, then coughed a little stream into a glass with a chip on the rim. She drank like it was a promise. That afternoon, I took 2 buses to the Brookfield County Courthouse. Every step felt like a grown man's step I had borrowed. The security guard looked at me funny, and then looked at the folder in my arms, and decided I belonged to somebody inside who could yell at him, so he let me through. The clerk's office smelled like printer ink and peppermint lip balm. Behind the counter sat a woman whose name tag read M. Elkins, and whose eyes said, "I have seen everything." "Hi," I said. "Hi," she said, and she smiled because it's a reflex for her. "You lost, sweetie?" "No, ma'am. I'm here to file an emergency motion for next friend representation under Rule 17C. I slid the packet under the glass with both hands, the way you present an offering in church. She stopped smiling. "I'll need a docket number," I added, as politely as I knew how. "Halden Properties versus Ward. Case filed 2 days ago." Ms. Elkins peered at me, then at the packet, then at the ceiling like there might be a memo stapled to it about what to do if a child shows up with perfect tabs and a table of contents. "Do you have a parent with you?" "My mother," I said, "is the person I'm representing. She works 2 jobs and is currently under medical evaluation for stress and dehydration. The affidavit is tab 3. The ER note is behind it. I marked the relevant line with a blue flag." Her mouth opened, closed. She was tired. She didn't need a spectacle. She picked up the packet, flipped, frowned in the way, not the no way. "Hang on," she murmured, and disappeared into a door that said, "Staff only," in the same kind of serif font that had made me clench my teeth last night. I stood alone with the wall clock and a poster about juror duty that had a group of people smiling like they were holding ice cream. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. I counted each tick like steps toward the edge of a cliff. She came back with a man in a shirt and tie who had "supervisor" written in his eyebrows. He studied me as if waiting for the punchline. "You're, filing this?" "Yes." "You understand this is a formal court document?" "Yes." "You understand that if you misrepresent anything, there are penalties?" "Perjury," I said, "because when adults threaten you, sometimes precision makes them blink." "Yes," he blinked. "Except the filing," Ms. Elkins said softly, like it hurt her feelings to be surprised by the world in a good way. She took out a heavy stamp and thunked it down. "Received." The date hit the paper like it had been waiting to be born. "Court date is next Friday," she said. "Housing calendar, Judge Holloway." The name made something cold touch the back of my neck. Holloway was a legend. If you were a landlord, he was your saint. If you were a tenant, he was a weather forecast that always said hail. People said he'd never ruled against a major property owner. People said his courtroom was a conveyor belt. I pictured a factory line where people like us slid through with labels: non-payment, negligent, undesirable. "Thank you," I told Ms. Elkins. "I appreciate your help." She looked at me like she wanted to hug me and also didn't want to get fired. "Good luck," she said, and she meant it. On the bus home, I watched the city roll by, pawn shops and payday loan signs, a dentist's office open on Saturdays, a bakery that used to be a furniture store. At a red light, I saw Victor Halden's car glide through the cross street, windows dark like sunglasses on a shark. He didn't see me. His phone was to his ear. He smiled. Not the good kind. I got off 2 stops early and walked the long way, past the river. It hid under a bridge like it was ashamed of something. On the guardrail, a spray-painted message read, "No hero is coming." I ran my fingers over the letters and thought, okay, then it's us. That night, Mom made rice and eggs and cut an orange into exact thirds. One for me, one for her. One for the next morning when we would need to remember what sweetness tasted like. I showed her the stamped paper, and she touched it like a baby's hair. "You did it," she breathed. "We did it," I corrected, and we both pretended not to hear my stomach growl like a faraway storm. The next day, people started showing up. I don't know who told Mrs. Lopez in 2A, but she knocked with a stack of Polaroids from when her kitchen ceiling looked like a rain cloud. Mr. Clarence, from 1F, slid a folder across our table with timelines of heating outages he'd written in pencil, like a diary. 2 teenagers I'd seen skateboarding by the dumpster sent me phone videos of roaches in the laundry room marching like a parade. Ms. Gloria wrote down every time the water went out, every date, every hour. Evidence collects when you give people a place to put it. "Why are you doing this?" Mrs. Lopez asked me in Spanish, slow and careful, and I understood enough, poor K2, to answer. "Because no one else did," I said. "Because it's right." She put her hand on my cheek and laughed, and then cried, and then laughed again. "Abogado," she said. "Mi pequeño abogado." My little lawyer. I went to the library every day that week until Mr. Keene, the night guard with a gray mustache and a soft heart, started leaving the side door propped with a folded magazine. "For fresh air," he would say, not looking at me. "Gets stuffy in there, doesn't it?" Counselor, the raccoon I named when I found the books, watched me from the dumpster, little hands folded over his belly like a judge with a secret life. I built binders. I labeled everything with tabs that made me feel like a person with a job. I learned to love the smell of plastic page protectors. I read the Judicial Code of Conduct for the state of New Amber. That's where Brookfield sits, the map no one seems to study until it hurts them. I read an article about judges and golf clubs. I learned a phrase, appearance of impropriety. You don't have to be proven dirty. You just have to look like you enjoy the mud. I also learned this. The court posts judges' financial disclosure reports if you know which basement office to ask in and which hour to show up when the lady with the rainbow glasses is working. People hide things in plain sight, and they hide the rest in PDFs. At home, Mom tried to sleep, tried to eat, tried to tell me that even if we lost, she was proud. When she smiled, her eyes went to a far window, like she was watching the version of us that already made it. On Wednesday night, she didn't come home by 11. By midnight, my knuckles hurt from ringing. At 1, my phone rang. A man said, "This is Mercy County ER," and the world bent like hot plastic. By the time I got there, she was a shadow behind glass, an IV taped to her arm, her hand bruised from where they'd tried to find a vein. The nurse said, dehydration and exhaustion, and she needs rest. The doctor said, "Is there someone who can help at home?" Like help was a person who could appear out of smoke. I sat in a chair too big for me and watched the heart monitor measure her second by second. It made a soft beeping that sounded like a countdown to something I refused to name. A social worker came in and asked questions about our apartment. about ongoing legal issues, about whether we had community support. I answered like a polite robot because anything you say can be stapled to a report and thrown back at you. She gave me a brochure with a smiling family on the front. I folded it twice and put it in my pocket like a bandage I didn't want but might need. My mother woke, saw me, and tried to apologize for scaring me. The ridiculousness of that, her apologizing, hit me so hard I almost laughed. I squeezed her hand. "We're okay," I told her. "Drink the water, please." She rolled her eyes in a tiny joke and sipped obediently. "Bossy," she whispered, and her voice cracked in a way that made me want to smash a wall and also knit a blanket and also go to law school tomorrow morning. I made a decision there in the hum and antiseptic and quiet shoes. If the adults with power were going to act like a storm, then I would be a building that didn't fall. If they were going to count on us not knowing the rules, then I would know them so well I could recite them backwards in my sleep. If they were going to play dirty, then I was going to play specific. The next morning, I took our stamped motion, slid Mom's ER note into the file, and wrote a short cover letter in my neatest hand. Emergency notice of incapacity remains in effect. Next friend appearing at Friday hearing. Please confirm on docket. I walked it back to Ms. Elkins like a mail carrier with one important letter for the only person in town who reads. She stamped again. Thunk. Judge Holloway's calendar is full, she murmured, frowning, then tapping. He'll squeeze you in, 10 a.m. Squeeze, I repeated, tasting the word. It tasted like a hallway that's too narrow on purpose. I spent Thursday in a corner of the library with a pile of cases and the financial disclosures I'd pulled from the basement office. I highlighted until my highlighter died, then borrowed one from a college kid who asked what class I was cramming for. Life, I said, and he laughed, and then realized I wasn't joking and looked at my binder like it might explode. At 7, Mr. Keene turned the sign on the front door to closed and ambled over. You're gonna make me believe in something again, aren't you? He said, without a question mark. I hope so, I said. He cracked the side door a little wider. Fresh air. I pulled a file from the stack. Merritt A. Holloway, Financial Disclosure 20XX. I ran my finger down the assets. Mutual funds. A municipal bond. An in-kind membership listed for the Brookfield Harbor Club, a golf and dining club that gets its picture taken with mayors. Dues covered by an industry association. No details beyond that, but sometimes a shadow is a confession. I opened another file. Halden Properties, LLC, Partners and Affiliates. Halfway down the page, a name. Brookfield Property Owners Council. The very association that loves Brookfield Harbor Club memberships and hates tenant organizing. Chair, Victor Halden. I sat very still. The room made a sound that wasn't a sound, just the moment your brain makes a click. I printed the public pages. I circled a line. I wrote appearance of impropriety in the margin and underlined it twice. I didn't think about what it would mean to say those words out loud, in front of the man they belonged to. I didn't think about what grown men with money and secrets do when children lift the cloth. I packed my bag. Friday morning smelled like coffee burning on a hot plate, and the fear of people who pretend not to be afraid. Outside courtroom 2C, tenants clutched folders and vertigo. Landlords stood in groups checking their watches, a choreography of indifference. I wore my best blue shirt and the oversized blazer Mom had found on a clearance rack. It was still too big. I liked the way it made me feel borrowed, like I was trying on the future. When the clerk called our case, the room shifted. Phones came up like a forest of red eyes. Judge Holloway adjusted his robe. The bailiff smirked. Halden Properties versus Ward, the clerk read. Parties present? Victor Halden stood, smooth as money. His counsel rose, Mr. Price himself. Jaw like a ruler, pocket square like a flag. I stood too. My knees shook exactly once. I pressed them together until they remembered. Your names for the record, Holloway intoned. Victor Halden. Graham Price, counsel. I took a breath. Jaylen Ward, appearing as next friend for Amara Ward under Rule 17C. The pen in Holloway's hand paused mid-scratch. His eyes rose in 2 clicks. He looked at me the way people look at a bee inside a car. Surprised, irritated, unsure if it will sting. The pearl headband woman laughed again. The bailiff shifted his weight, eager. Get this child out of my courtroom, Holloway said, gavel up like a threat. My mother's breath sucked in. The gallery smiled that mean smile. I didn't move. Your Honor, I said, and my voice did what I asked it to do. With respect. The motion is filed, and the court accepted it. We have an emergency. Medical incapacity documented from the ER. Under 17C, the court has discretion to allow a next friend to proceed. I am prepared to cite supporting authority and present our defense. Silence did a slow bloom, petal by petal. On the other side of the aisle, Mr. Price let a smirk curl. Your Honor, this is absurd. The court will not permit a minor to practice law. I'm not seeking bar privileges, I said, turning toward him because Mom taught me to look people in the eye when they try to shrink you. I'm seeking standing to speak for my mother while she recovers. And what, exactly, makes you competent to do so? His tone put the word in quotes. I could have told him about the books, the overnight charts, Counselor the Raccoon. The way my mother's hands shook when she tried to sign her name after a 12-hour shift. I could have told him about the real reason behind the rule, that justice without access is just a script. Instead, I said, evidence. He opened his mouth to release a balloon of laughter, then caught something in my expression and tied the balloon back down. Judge Holloway leaned forward. Proceed, he said at last, each syllable like a coin he hated to spend. But understand this, young man. This court will not tolerate antics. No antics, I promised, just accuracy. I turned to the stack of binders that I had organized by color like a rainbow that meant business. Blue, facts. Red, law. Green, landlord's lies and our proof their lies. Yellow, weird money things, a category that had felt like a dare until last night. I laid the photos on the evidence table first, the crack in the wall, the stain in the bathroom ceiling, the radiator drip captured in the corner like a guilty conscience, dates in the bottom corner, the day we moved in, my mother's handwriting on the back of each. Reported 3-7, no response. Reported 322, in progress. Reported 4-2, tenant advised to wait. Price rolled his eyes for show, but he leaned just a hair to see the dates. I spoke the way a person walks across a creek on rocks. Step, balance, next step. Your Honor, under the implied warranty of habitability, a landlord must provide safe, livable conditions. Heat, sanitary plumbing, sound walls, a roof that doesn't leak. Pre-existing defects are the landlord's responsibility. We reported them. We have copies of every ticket. Holden properties ignored or delayed. When we followed up, they issued this claim for damages, $50,000, based entirely on conditions documented before our tenancy. We are not the first family this has happened to. I didn't look back at the gallery when I said it, but I could feel a murmur button itself shut. People who had walked in alone were realizing they were a crowd. Price cleared his throat. Even if some issues predated occupancy, The extent of damage indicates neglect. Tenants have duties as well. Absolutely, I said, nodding because it's disarming to agree. Which is why my mother cleaned mold with bleach until her hands cracked. Which is why she called repeatedly. Which is why she bought a space heater when the radiator coughed dust. We have receipts. We have dates. And you think a child understands the scope of... I think truth is not an adult-only concept, I said. It came out sharper than I meant, but it was too late to take it back. And I think this court will care about a timeline. Holloway's chin lifted, the hint of a sneer ghosting his mouth. Do not lecture this court. No, sir, I said at once. I am asking to be heard. He stared at me long enough to make my palms sweat. Then he shifted his attention to Price. Proceed with your opening. Price spoke for 10 minutes. He was good. I'll give him that. He painted my mother as overwhelmed and careless, our home as a pigsty, the building as well-maintained until we arrived. He used words like egregious and deplorable, because long words sometimes hypnotize people. He showed photos taken after we moved in, close-ups with no context. He gestured like he was shaping air into proof. When he finished, I stood again. My legs forgot to be small. Your Honor, before I proceed further, I must raise a concern regarding potential conflicts of interest that could affect the fairness of this proceeding. The sentence dropped into the room like a glass. Price's head snapped. Halden's jaw moved left, then right, like he was chewing something that tasted like metal. Judge Holloway's eyes went flat. What concern? I didn't blink. Judicial ethics require recusal where there is a financial interest in a party or an appearance of impropriety. Public disclosures reflect an in-kind membership at Brookfield Harbor Club, courtesy of an industry association chaired by Mr. Halden. I respectfully request a brief recess so I can submit the relevant pages for the record and avoid misstating anything. You could hear the fluorescent lights hum. You could hear the bailiff breathe. You could hear 3 attorneys realize that their easy win had started smoking. Holloway's face whitened by a shade that had no name. Recess, he grated. 30 minutes. The gavel cracked. The gallery exploded. People standing, reporters angling for the aisle, whispers rising like steam. Halden turned toward his attorneys with the look of a man who just heard a rattlesnake purr. Price leaned in, lips tight, whispering something that sounded like a prayer or a threat. I closed my binder. My mother squeezed my hand so hard it hurt. Her eyes were wet, but her mouth set. You okay? Yes, I said. Are you? She laughed under her breath, a sound like tires on gravel. I just watched my 9-year-old ask a judge to check his ethics, so I guess I am now. We stepped into the hallway's roar, and I learned what happens when a whisper turns into a wave. A reporter with a yellow microphone the size of my fist appeared out of nowhere. Young man, Jaylen, did you just accuse? I'm not accusing anyone, I said, breath even. I'm asking for fairness. Another voice. Are you being coached? Is there an attorney behind? No. I shook my head. There are rules. I read them. I felt Halden before I saw him. He moves with a sound, like money when it's in a hurry. Kid, he said softly, stepping close enough that I could smell whatever cologne wealthy men wear to convince strangers they deserve to be obeyed. Listen to me. You're playing with things you don't understand. My mother stepped between us so quickly I almost laughed at the magic trick of it. Back up, she said. No, please. No, sir. Just a line drawn with her body. Halden smiled like a knife. This is the real world. People get hurt in the real world. I looked past him, not at him, the way you avoid feeding a stray dog the attention it came to bite. "Are you trying to intimidate a party during a recess in a pending case?" I asked lightly. "Because that's a bad look. For the record." His face did a tiny tick. It delighted me in a petty way, and I forgave myself for the delight. Down the hall, Ms. Gloria held up her notebook to a camera. "He keeps records," she said proudly, pointing at me like I was her grandson. "We all do now." "Jay," my mother murmured, leaning close, "if you push this, people with power will push back harder." "I know," I said, and my voice stayed calm, even though my stomach had shrunk to the size of a grape. "But if we don't push, they keep doing it. To us. To them." I nodded at the hallway full of faces. All of them. She took my face in her hands and let her thumbs rest on my cheekbones. "Okay," she whispered, like an oath she was taking to the oldest part of herself. "Okay. I trust you." We had 5 minutes left of recess. I ducked into the bathroom, splashed cold water on my wrists, the way YouTube suggested once in a video about panic attacks. My reflection looked like a boy wearing a blazer and a dare. "Just say the truth," I told him. "The truth doesn't need to be loud, it needs to be clear." When we walked back into 2C, the air felt heavier. Holloway took his seat slower, like a man who had climbed a hill. The clerk called the room to order. "All rise." Everyone rose, except the fear in my chest, which got taller. I stood. I picked up the yellow binder. Weird money things. I looked at my mother. She nodded once, and that single nod felt like 1,000 hands at my back. "Your Honor," I said, and my voice went all the way to the last row without stress. "As I stated, I'm submitting for the record publicly available financial disclosures indicating an in-kind membership you received from an association chaired by the plaintiff. I'm not asserting bad faith. I'm asserting a reasonable question about appearance and fairness. I respectfully request recusal and reassignment." I held out the copies. The clerk took them, climbed the 2 steps, handed them up. Holloway didn't touch them at first. He looked at me like he could shrink me with his eyes. I didn't shrink. I waited. The quiet grew teeth. "Motion under advisement," he said finally, barely louder than a cough. We'll address it." "No, Your Honor," I heard myself say, and it was like someone else was speaking through me. Some version of me with a spine made of something that remembers fire. "Respectfully, the parties need to know whether the bench is impartial before we proceed." Someone in the back gasped. Lawyers turned their heads. Price half rose, then sat again because there was nowhere to go but forward. Holloway stared down at his hands. When he looked up, he wasn't a storm anymore. He was a man who had run out of road. 5 minutes, he said, as if granting himself mercy. He rose and disappeared through the side door. The gallery erupted, then tried not to. The bailiff barked for order and failed to find it. My mother squeezed my shoulder, hard enough for me to know that our lives had just tilted. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt like a person on the first rung of a ladder that might not be attached to anything. Then the side door opened again. A new judge walked in, black robe the same, face entirely different. She carried herself like she could smell when a room needed air. The clerk stood straighter. Even the bailiff's jaw softened an inch. "Good morning," she said, voice clear as a bell you actually want to hear. "Judge Alana Pierce, presiding by emergency reassignment." I exhaled for the first time in an hour. "We will proceed," Judge Pierce said, glancing at the papers the clerk handed up. "And we will do so with a clean slate. Counsel, Young Mr. Ward, present your evidence. Victor Halden went still, like a deer who finally realizes the headlights are not the moon. I opened my blue binder, and that's when the door at the back cracked, just enough for a courier to slip in with a manila envelope and a signature pad. He walked it to Price. Price signed, eyes scanning. His mouth tightened. He put the envelope down. He didn't want to touch it again. I recognized the logo in the corner. Brookfield Harbor Club. I looked at my mother. She looked at me. We didn't smile. We didn't need to. The room had finally remembered its job. And if you think that's where the story gets big, if you think the biggest thing that happened that day was a judge stepping down in the face of a kid with a binder, you should see what we found when we started pulling on the thread everyone swore wasn't there. Judge Alana Pierce didn't perform authority. She wore it like breath. Even the wood in Courtroom 2C seemed to relax an inch as she settled, scanning the room like she could tell which parts needed light and which needed warning. "Mr. Halden," she said, "you brought this claim. You may testify first. All testimony is under oath. All exhibits must be authenticated. Counsel, you will mind your objections. Young Mr. Ward." She met my eyes and didn't blink. "You will do the same." "Yes, Your Honor." My mother squeezed my fingers under the table. Her hand was warm. Mine were cold and buzzing like soda. The clerk swore Halden in. He raised his right hand like the gesture bored him. He had the face of a man who won things for a living, and the posture of someone who couldn't conceive of a world where that might stop. "State your name." "Victor Jonas Halden." "And your occupation?" "I'm the managing partner of Halden Property Group." "A landlord," Judge Pierce translated, so the court reporter wouldn't have to type a paragraph when one word would do. "Yes." Graham Price rose for direct. His jaw worked like he was chewing a point he couldn't wait to spit out. "Mr. Halden, please describe the condition of the Ward unit as found by your team." Halden spoke with the smoothness of someone who practiced in mirrors. Uninhabitable due to tenant negligence, extensive water damage to the bathroom ceiling, and down the shared wall, cracked plaster across the living room, a rusted radiator leaking into subfloor, and pervasive mold caused by poor housekeeping practices and failure to ventilate. Did your company provide adequate maintenance prior to these conditions? Of course. Date of your last inspection before the reported damages? He pretended to think. We perform rolling inspections quarterly. I don't have the exact date. Price made a show of sighing. Your Honor, we can submit the logs. Please do, Judge Pierce said, dry as paper. But let's anchor this to something firmer than rolling. Continue. Price held up glossy photos. The brown halo in our bathroom, the crack like a vein across the living room wall, the dish under the radiator catching a rusty tear. He turned each to face the judge. He didn't turn them to face the gallery. He knew how audiences work. And your damages estimate? $50,000. Conservative. Conservative. I bit down on the laugh that tried to jump out. Conservative is a word rich people use when the number is large enough to hurt you twice. Nothing further at this time, Price said, smoothing his tie like he'd just set a table he expected to eat from. Judge Pierce's gaze slid to me. Mr. Ward? I stood. My knees unlocked, then locked again, and then remembered the floor was my friend. Yes, Your Honor. I have a preliminary question for the court. May I publish defense exhibits for the gallery when relevant? There are multiple tenants present with context on dates. Price was on his feet before I finished. Absolutely not. This is not theater. It's public court, I said gently. Understanding builds trust. I can also hand them up only to the bench if that's preferred. Judge Pierce thought for a beat, then nodded. Bench copies for now. If I find it useful, we'll put them on the screen. I carried the blue binder to the clerk. Tabs looked like a rainbow arguing with fear. Defense exhibits A through F, I said. Move-in photos with timestamps and metadata. Tenant service tickets with confirmation numbers. ER note, heat outage logs, and a copy of the building's last city inspection, 3 months before we signed the lease. Price's head snapped at the last one. His pen paused in the air like a bird that just realized its glass in front of it. Proceed, the judge said. Mr. Halden, I began, turning to him, feeling smaller than his belt buckle and somehow taller than the room. You swore under oath that the damages were caused by us. Look at Defense Exhibit A, Photo 1. I waited while the bailiff passed a copy to the witness stand. Do you see the brown halo on the bathroom ceiling? He glanced, chin high. Yes. Please read the timestamp. He flicked his eyes to the bottom. That proves nothing. Timestamps can be faked. Not when they're embedded in the file metadata and corroborated by third-party cloud backups. I kept my voice level. But let's make it simpler. Flip to the back of the photo. My mother's handwriting, the date, and the person she spoke to at your office. And I held up a stapled printout. Tab B, the service ticket number you generated. Would you like to read it aloud? Price objected. Foundation, how can a child establish? Overruled, Judge Pierce said mildly. If the witness contests authenticity, we'll have a hearing. For now, answer the question. Halden adjusted his cuff. One ticket number proves nothing. Let's try 12, I said. And the gallery made the sound of a throat, trying not to cheer. We walked through each, a slow drumbeat of dates and tasks, and in-progress notes from a maintenance portal that might as well have been a black hole. Each time Price tried to widen the gap. Each time the date closed it. Now please look at Defense Exhibit F, I said finally, my voice calm, my palms buzzing. City Inspection Report, 3 months before we moved in. Signed by D. Pritchard, Municipal Housing Inspector. Itemized defects. Water intrusion in bath ceiling, spalling plaster in living room, radiator valve leak, visible mold in corner baseboard, required repairs noted, status incomplete. I let the last word sit. Would you like to explain why you rented the unit in that condition? He smiled a lawyer's smile without being one. We addressed the issues. By painting over the leak? I tilted my head. Because paint isn't a pipe. Laughter rippled. A single cough tried to cover it, and failed. Counsel, Judge Pierce warned without looking at Price. Control your client's face. I took a breath, not too fast. Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibits A through F. Admitted, she said. And Mr. Price, you will provide the court with the quarterly inspection logs you promised. Tomorrow morning, he said, counting on momentum to outrun truth. No, the judge said softly. By 2 p.m. today. Price's jaw twitched. Understood. I turned back to the stand. Mr. Halden, did you also file an insurance claim for this same tenant-caused damage? Standard procedure, he said quickly. We report losses. I lifted the green binder. To Brookfield Mutual. Claim number ending 1763. You attached photos of the bathroom ceiling. The same ceiling the city flagged before we lived there. You swore to the carrier these were caused by tenant negligence. That's not a loss report. That's misrepresentation. Price sprang up. Objection. This is beyond the scope. It's exactly the scope, Judge Pierce said. Overruled. Mr. Ward, how did you obtain that claim file? Public Records request to the Housing Authority for claims associated with outstanding habitability violations, I said. They were, unusually, responsive when I used every magic word they love. I couldn't help it. A little smile snuck out. Transparency, oversight, accountability. A few people in the gallery snorted. The judge's eyes warmed, just a shade. "Watch your editorializing," she said, not unkindly. "Yes, Your Honor." I kept going. We didn't have a single grenade. We had 100 nails. I laid them one by one. Mrs. Lopez's photo of her kitchen ceiling, same stain shape, same corner, date stamped before her tenancy, Mr. Clarence's heating logs, screen captures from the maintenance portal showing closed tickets without work orders, a letter from a pediatrician noting mold-related respiratory problems in a toddler 2 floors down. With each document, the room's temperature changed by a degree. By the time I was done, Price's pen had left a dark bruise on his legal pad. The smirk was gone. In its place, math. He was recalculating what survival looked like. "Your witness," I said. He rose for cross, finding his footing like a man stepping onto ice that he hopes is thicker than it looks. "Mr. Ward, you're a child." "Correct." "You have no legal training." I could have said I have binders. I could have said your training didn't teach you how to see poor people as human. I just said, I have facts. He tried another angle. "You compiled these materials yourself?" "With help from our neighbors." I gestured to the gallery. Faces met mine like a net that could catch a fall. They're tired of being invisible. "Isn't it possible you misunderstood the inspection report? You're not an engineer." "Happy to defer to one." I looked at the bench. "Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness who can authenticate the city report and explain the standard." Price blinked. "You can't just— Who?" I turned toward the back. The door opened like I had tugged a string. A man in a blue work shirt stepped in. Mid-30s, forearms nicked, eyes tired, jaw set in the way of someone who has decided to stop apologizing for breathing. A municipal ID hung on a lanyard around his neck. "Name?" the clerk asked when he reached the front. "Deshaun Pritchard," he said, voice low but steady. "Municipal housing. I conducted that inspection." My mother sucked air. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Pritchard. D. Pritchard. The signature at the bottom of Exhibit F. "How did you—" I began. He gave me a quick, almost embarrassed smile. "Your neighbor, Ms. Gloria, found me. Said a kid was trying to do the courthouse's job. Figured I should bring my clipboard and a spine." Judge Pierce's eyebrows lifted 0.5 millimeter. "Mr. Pritchard, will you be testifying in your official capacity?" He glanced toward the back of the room like there might be a supervisor hiding behind a bench. "On my lunch break," he said. "But yes, I will tell the truth." The bailiff swore him in. I kept questions simple. "Mr. Pritchard, did you inspect Maple Crest 3 months before the Wards moved in?" "Yes." "What did you find?" "Water intrusion from an old riser in the bathroom stack. Cracked plaster from settling aggravated by moisture. Corroded radiator valve leaking. Active mold along a baseboard due to the leak." "Were repair orders issued?" "Yes." "Were they closed?" He shot a look at Halden. "Not by us." "What does that mean?" "It means the landlord has to submit proof of repair to the city." We didn't get it. Price was up. "Objection. Speculation." "Overruled. He can testify to his office's records," Judge Pierce said. I nodded, heart climbing higher up my throat. "Mr. Pritchard, in your professional opinion, could these defects properly be characterized as tenant-caused if they predated occupancy?" "No." He didn't hesitate. Is painting over visible mold an acceptable abatement? No. Is leaving a corroded radiator valve to drip into subfloor until it warps a standard of care for habitability? No. Each no landed like a clean blade. No flourish, just cut. Price did his best on cross. You have many buildings. Is it possible your file is incomplete? Anything's possible, Pritchard said, eyes flinty. But not if you're doing your job? You're angry, Price said, pouncing like that made the facts cry. Correct, Pritchard said, because I keep seeing the same thing. Landlords treat apartments like ATMs, then call us when the machine spits out noise. The families who live there get blamed. Kids get sick. Elderly people get cold. We write it up. Nothing changes because no one does this. He nodded at me. In here. Judge Pierce didn't tell him to watch his editorializing. Thank you, Mr. Pritchard, I said softly. He moved to step down. One more thing, he blurted, stopping himself with a breath. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, if I could, I brought copies of a pattern of violation summary my office compiled last quarter on properties owned by Halden Group. It's not final. It's not public. But I can't hold it anymore. Someone needs to see it. The room inhaled like a wave. Price exploded. Absolutely not. That is privileged agency work product. It's not counsel's work product, Judge Pierce said, brows knitting. Mr. Pritchard, if you disclose city material, you may face consequences with your employer. I understand, he said simply. She studied him for 2 long seconds, then exhaled. The court will accept the proffer under seal. If it's relevant to this case, we'll determine the proper redactions. Hand it to the clerk. He did. His hands didn't shake. When he stepped away, he paused by our table, leaned very slightly so only I could hear. Keep your head. Trying, I whispered. We weren't done. Not even close. But the air had shifted from please believe us to you have to answer this. I called Ms. Lopez to authenticate her photos. I called Mr. Clarence to testify about heat. I tendered Dr. Rahman's letter about mold-induced wheezing in her patient, a 6-year-old 2 floors down. Price objected on hearsay. I offered it not for the truth of the medical diagnosis, but for notice to the landlord, the fact that he was told and did nothing. Overruled. Your Honor, I said, feeling like I was balancing plates and words and gravity, I move for dismissal with prejudice of all claims against my mother and for sanctions under Rule 11 for knowingly filing a frivolous suit. In the alternative, we request judgment for the defense and referral to the district attorney for potential insurance fraud and tenant harassment. A sound rolled through the gallery. Half gasp, half breath held. My mother's shoulder touched mine. We did not look at each other. If we did, we might dissolve. Price rose, the last of his polish rucked by something like panic. Your Honor, at minimum, we are entitled to an evidentiary hearing. You're having one, Judge Pierce said coolly, and to rebut testimony in full. We also object to this court being used as a platform for a crusade. A crusade, Judge Pierce repeated softly. Is that what you call it when people collect evidence? He swallowed. May we have a brief recess to... No, she said. Then, to me, Mr. Ward, you have one more witness? I hadn't planned to, but at that exact second, the wooden door at the rear of the courtroom opened again. A woman in a navy suit with a DA's seal pinned to her lapel stepped in, quiet as intent. She didn't take a seat. She stood against the back wall, arms folded, listening not like a spectator, but like a recorder. I didn't know her name. I knew what her presence meant. Someone had been on the courthouse thread. Someone had forwarded a clip. Someone who could file charges was now in the room, collecting the feel of it. "I do," I said, fueled by something bigger than whatever I thought I was planning. "We call Mr. Halden back to the stand." He went rigid. Price whispered fiercely. The judge made a small gesture with her fingers that meant, "Don't waste my time." Halden returned, moving like he'd never learned how to walk with gravity. I held up the yellow binder. Price's eyes flicked to it, then away like it was a stove. "Mr. Halden," I said, keeping my voice almost kind, the way you talk to a neighbor holding a match near your curtains. "Can you identify this invoice?" He squinted. "It's from Brookfield Harbor Club," I supplied. "Annual dues, $12,000. In-kind membership, Merritt Holloway." The name sat on the table like a dropped knife. "Payer of record, Brookfield Property Owners Council." I paused. "Chair, you." A groan passed through the gallery, the sound a city makes when it wakes up with a headache and remembers why. "Your Honor," Price barked. "Irrelevant now that Judge Holloway has recused." "We are cleaning the record you attempted to try this case on," Judge Pierce said, voice like glass. "Ask your client to answer." "Do you deny paying those dues through your counsel?" I asked. Halden licked his lower lip, a tiny child-of-habit gesture that made me see him as human for half a blink. "Our council supports many civic leaders," he said finally. "Like judges who rule for landlords 98% of the time?" "Objection!" Price shouted, desperate enough to shout. "Improper!" "Sustained," Judge Pierce said. "Numbers without foundation." She turned to me. "Do you have the foundation?" I did. I had pages and pages from the court's own records. But there was a line between proving a case and burning the courthouse down. I nodded. "Withdrawn for now, Your Honor." I pivoted. "Mr. Halden, did you know your property manager, B. Chan, certified the Ward unit move-in ready the week after the city cited it?" He glanced at Price. "I rely on my team." "Did you know she emailed your regional VP that same day saying, 'Paint it over, should be fine until fall'?" Price's face went slack for a heartbeat. "Objection, there's no email." "Defense Exhibit G," I said, and the clerk's stamp thunked like a heartbeat. "We obtained it during discovery from an employee who—" I caught myself. No speeches. "From a source." Halden read the line. For the first time, something like heat colored his face. Shame? Fury? Fear of the math changing? Maybe all of it. "Mr. Halden," I said quietly, because quiet can be louder. "There are two choices here. Either you knew, or you chose not to know. The law treats those the same when people get hurt." Price stepped in, shoulders squared like a shield. "That's enough," he said to me, as if he were a parent and I were a toddler reaching for a stove. "You made your spectacle." "The spectacle," Judge Pierce said in a voice nobody in that room would forget, "began when a child had to learn the rules you used like weapons." The room went so still you could hear pens thinking. She looked at me. "Anything further before I take this under submission?" "Yes. One more thing. I hadn't planned to, but truth has a way of knocking you forward. Your Honor, there's a pattern here bigger than our unit, bigger than this building. It's not my place to prosecute it, but it is my place to ask you to protect us, while the people who can, do. We're asking for dismissal with prejudice, award of reasonable costs, and an order enjoining Halden Group from filing or pursuing evictions in any unit flagged by the city, as unremediated until those flags are cleared. And we need a protective order. My mother got followed last night by a black SUV from her job to our street. She recorded the plate. I don't know whose it is. I don't care. We're scared. I'm asking the court to say we're not prey. The last line came out before I asked it for permission. My mother's breath hitched. Somewhere behind us, someone whispered, "Amen." Judge Pierce didn't blink. "Counsel?" she said to Price, who had moved past red into a color that didn't have a polite name. "We deny any. There is no—" He glanced at Halden. He swallowed. "We strongly oppose any injunctive—" "Noted," she said. "Sit." He sat. She looked at the DA in the back without looking like she was looking. Then she straightened a sheet of paper that didn't need straightening. "This court is a fact machine," she said. "It processes proof, not volume. Here's what the machine sees so far. Defects documented before tenancy. Notice to landlord, inadequate response. Suit filed blaming tenants for pre-existing damage. Insurance claim mirroring suit. City inspector corroboration. And, under seal, a document I have yet to read that suggests the machine should be bigger than me." She looked at me again. It felt like sunlight, with its eyes open. "I'll take 15 minutes to review the under seal proffer. Do not leave the building. No one approaches parties or witnesses. Bailiff, clear a path to the hallway for Ms. Ward and her son." The gavel didn't slam. It landed, like a truth. The hallway erupted when the door opened. Reporters leaned like wheat in wind, microphones blossoming. The DA slid along the wall and disappeared through another door like a shadow that knows where it's going. Security formed a soft triangle around us. I could hear my name and not my name. Kid lawyer, 9 years old. Genius, who's coaching him. This is wild. Words that stuck to my clothes and slid off my skin. "Breathe," my mother said, anchoring me with a palm between my shoulder blades. I hadn't realized I'd stopped. Ms. Gloria elbowed through the crowd with a plastic grocery bag and thrust it at me. "Snack," she commanded. "You can't save the world on an empty stomach." Inside, a juice box, a granola bar, a banana with a brown dot that looked like a freckle. My eyes stung. I took the juice box and stabbed the straw like I was doing surgery. The first sip tasted like sweet and alive. "Jay," Mom whispered, "whatever happens, I'm proud of you." I nodded, because if I opened my mouth right then, a different kind of flood would start. A man edged closer. A maintenance worker from Maple Crest I recognized. Benny, cap backwards, eyes like he'd slept badly for a year. He lowered his voice. "Kid," he said, "I never saw none of this." He looked at my mother, then back to me. "But I left something at the help desk for you yesterday. In a plain envelope, it's copies, work orders, notes, and something else. Stuff I shouldn't have, probably. Take care." Before I could answer, he was gone, swept into the human tide, swallowed by bigger bodies and choices. I found the help desk, an island of laminate in a sea of people. The clerk handed over a cheap manila envelope with Ward written in block letters. It was heavier than it looked. Mom and I tucked into a corner by a soda machine. I slid the documents halfway out. Work orders with scribbles, photos, a thumb drive taped to the inside flap. "What is it?" Mom asked, keeping a lookout like we were passing notes in class. "Evidence," I said, voice hushed. My fingers shook just enough to make the paper whisper. I slipped the thumb drive into a courthouse kiosk computer. A folder blinked open. Video. I clicked. Grainy footage. A timestamp I could check later. The camera looked down from a corner I recognized. A manager's office at Maple Crest. Last night. A man at a shredder feeding in papers like appetite. The angle caught his face every few seconds when he looked up to check the door. B. Chan. The property manager. Except at the edge of the frame, Leaning on the desk like he owned the edges of other people's lives, stood Victor Halden. He was talking. There was no audio, but you didn't need sound to read lips sometimes. Get rid of it, all of it. Now. Another cut. Two men wheeling bankers' boxes out to a black SUV with a dent on the rear fender. A plate I could freeze and zoom later. Boxes labeled with unit numbers. My mother's handwriting visible on the side of one where she'd labeled a request months ago. Heat. My stomach dropped like an elevator that forgot its job. "He's destroying records," I said, "during a pending case." Mom's face did something I had never seen it do. She went calm in a way that wasn't peace. It was aim. "Give it to the clerk," she said. "Right now." We jogged the hallway like running would change the clock. I flagged the bailiff like a kid waves down a bus. "Urgent evidence," I told him, breathless. "Possible spoliation of records. Video. Time-stamped." He took one look at my face and hustled us through a side door to the clerk's window. The clerk glanced at the flash drive like it might bite, then buzzed us to the back office for chain of custody. The DA materialized again like she had been summoned by the word spoliation alone. "Play it," she said. No hello. We played it. She watched. No expression. When it ended, she exhaled through her nose like a person who's been running uphill for a long time and just saw the summit. "Don't move," she said, and disappeared with the drive. 15 minutes later, exactly the interval Judge Pierce had promised. Plus, the time it takes the DA to run down a hall at a quiet sprint. The bailiff called us back into 2C. The room felt like the moment before thunder. Halden was pale and tight in his chair. Price's hands were flat on the table in a way hands lay when they've run out of graceful things to do. The DA had taken a seat in the front row, two investigators now flanking the wall like shadows that learned manners. "Be seated," Judge Pierce said. Her eyes were different. Not angry. Decided. "Here's where we are," she began, tapping the sealed proffer with one finger, then the yellow binder with another, then a printout she didn't show us. "The city's summary, while preliminary, corroborates a pattern of pre-existing defects across units owned by plaintiff, followed by tenant-blaming litigation. The video file provided moments ago, authenticated by a witness I will not identify on the record yet, appears to show plaintiff supervising the destruction of documents last night, after this court took up the matter of potential conflicts, and while litigation was pending. That is spoliation. That is contempt. And that is a problem you cannot lawyer away." Silence pressed against the walls. I could hear my pulse in my teeth. "I am dismissing the claims against Ms. Ward with prejudice," Judge Pierce said. Each word clicked into place like a door locking from the inside. "I am awarding costs, which you will submit within 10 days. I am issuing a protective order enjoining plaintiff and any agent from contacting, surveilling, or otherwise harassing Ms. Ward and her son. I am referring the matter of the video and the pattern of violation file to the district attorney for investigation into potential insurance fraud, perjury, obstruction, and any related offenses." A sound broke out of my chest that wasn't a word. My mother grabbed my hand with both of hers. Someone behind us started clapping, and then stopped, because Judge Pierce lifted a palm, and the room remembered itself. "As to broader relief," she continued, "this court is not the legislature. But I can say this. Any eviction filed by Halden Property Group in a unit flagged by the city as unremediated is hereby stayed pending proof of remediation to the court's satisfaction. That is effective now." Price opened his mouth, closed it, looked at his client, did nothing. "And Mr. Halden," she added, You will surrender your passport to the clerk before you leave this building." There it was, the flicker of panic behind the eyes of a man who built a house out of other people's roofs and just heard a storm say its own name. "Court will recess," Judge Pierce said. "We reconvene at 3 p.m. for sanctions and contempt proceedings. If you destroy one more scrap of paper between now and then, you will spend the night in a room without a view. Is that clear?" He didn't answer. She didn't need him to. Gavel. Boom. People surged, then parted when the bailiff gestured. The DA stepped forward, spoke softly to the clerk, then to the judge, then to an investigator, then to me. "We'll be in touch," she said, and it was the first time I'd ever heard that sentence not sound like a lie. We made it into the hall before my knees reminded me I borrowed them. I leaned against the cool marble. The building hummed like it had a secret and wanted to tell someone good. Mom kissed my temple. "Breathe," she whispered again. "Slow." "I'm okay," I said, and realized maybe I meant it. For the first time in a month, my lungs opened all the way to the bottom. People hugged us. Ms. Lopez cried into my shoulder and called me mi héroe, and I told her I was just a boy with a binder. Mr. Clarence gripped my hand like we were men. Strangers touched my sleeve like I might be lucky. Lucky felt like the wrong word. We were loud with proof. That's not luck. That's work. A security officer approached. "Ms. Ward," he said, tipping his head to my mother, "there's another envelope for you at the desk." "Benny?" We followed him. "At the help desk." The clerk raised her eyebrows at me like I was her favorite trouble and slid an envelope across the counter. No name this time, no return. Heavy again. I opened it. Inside, a key with a metal tag stamped A114, a receipt from lockbox storage by the river, and a post-it with a single line in block letters. All the files they didn't burn. The world tilted, then steadied. Mom met my eyes. "We are not going alone," she said. "Agreed," I said, heart kicking like a rabbit. I looked down the hall where the DA was conferring with investigators. I looked back at the key winking in the bad fluorescent light. We turned toward the investigators. The moment my foot moved, a shadow slid across us. I looked up. Victor Halden stood 10 feet away, flanked by two men whose suits couldn't hide their necks. His face had shed charm like a snakeskin that stopped fitting. He wasn't posturing anymore. He was looking, grounded, direct, the way a person looks at a chessboard when they finally understand which move will end the game. His mouth curved, not into a smile, into something tighter. "Careful, kid," he said softly, so softly only I and my mother and the security officer could hear. "There are files, and then there are files." A chill ran up my back, like a string pulled by a cold hand. Behind him, one of the investigators lifted a phone to his ear, eyes on us, nodding at whatever the voice was saying. The DA had stopped mid-sentence. The judge's clerk hurried down the corridor like a letter had learned to run. The officer by my elbow leaned in. "We should get you both into a secure room," he murmured. I stared at Halden. I didn't blink. "We're not prey," I said. He shrugged once, the smallest concession of anything I'd ever seen. "Everyone is something," he murmured. "It's just a matter of who's hungry." Mom's hand found my shoulder. The officer gestured. The investigators started toward us, quick but not panicked. Then the lights flickered. Just a second. A blink. Enough to make the hallway gasp. When they steadied, the man with the long neck who'd been at Halden's left was moving. Away, not toward. He slid into the crowd like a fish, then was gone. The other security officer cursed softly into his collar mic. The DA shouted something I couldn't hear over the sudden thunder of shoes. The officer hustled us toward a side door. My mother squeezed the key in her fist so hard the metal left an imprint. I glanced back once. Halden was still there, watching, unreadable. It wasn't a stare down, it was a promise. The side door banged shut behind us. The hallway on the other side was empty and cold and smelled like floor wax and fear. The officer keyed open a room. "Stay here," he said. "Don't open the door for anyone but me." He left. Mom and I stood in the quiet. I looked at the key imprint on her palm. I looked at the lock on the door. I looked at the thumb drive icon still lit up in the back of my eyes like a coin-catching sun. "Jay," Mom whispered, "what if the files in that unit, what if they're not just about repairs?" The hum of the building felt louder suddenly. I thought of the golf club, the invoices, the inspections, the video, the hand that delivered the key, the way the lights had blinked like someone somewhere flipped something they shouldn't have. I swallowed. "We find out," I said. I lifted the key, cold and heavy on my skin, and the teeth of it caught the fluorescent light like a secret sharpening. The courthouse emptied like a lung. Reporters were outside, waiting to feed. Inside, the air smelled of coffee gone cold and tension that didn't know where to go next. The security officer led us through a side hallway and out a staff door that opened into the parking lot behind the building. The air was damp, thick with the kind of rain that hadn't decided whether it wanted to fall. Mom clutched her purse, her face pale but composed. I still had the key in my pocket. Metal edges dug into my thigh like a question that refused to soften. "Stay close," the officer said, scanning the lot. "The DA's team will meet you back at the precinct, but if this envelope's real, they'll want those files now." "Lockbox storage by the river," I murmured. "Unit A114. He looked at me sideways. "You memorized that already?" "Photographic memory," Mom said faintly. "He doesn't forget things." The officer gave a low whistle. "Then let's hope what you remember today saves more than rent money." The drive felt longer than it was. We followed the river south, the water a flat sheet of steel under a cloudy sky. Warehouses slouched behind fences, windows punched out like missing teeth. Lockbox storage sat at the end of the strip, rows of orange doors, security cameras that blinked without seeing. A second officer was already there, uniform half-zipped, holding a clipboard. "You're the Wards?" Mom nodded. "Detective Rhodes, Brookfield PD," he said. "We got a call from D.A. Carter. Said you've got something that might break half the landlord circuit in this county." "That's the rumor," I said quietly. He smiled despite himself. "Let's see it." We walked the narrow lanes between storage units until we reached A114. The padlock hung there, old and heavy. I slid the key in. It turned smooth, too smooth, like someone had oiled it recently. Mom's breath hitched. "Jay!" I pulled the door. It rolled up with a metallic groan that echoed down the rows. Inside was darkness, and then boxes. Dozens. Neat stacks labeled in the same neat handwriting I'd seen on every maintenance report. Unit 3D, 4B, 7F, 12C, each marked pending legal. Rhodes exhaled. "Lord, this looks like evidence warehouse's dream of being." He snapped photos. Another officer called in serial numbers over the radio. But there was something else. A metal filing cabinet in the corner, bolted to the floor, drawers locked. On the top drawer, a sticky note. "Private, VH." My stomach turned over. "Victor Halden," I whispered. Rhodes jiggled the handle. "We'll need a warrant for this." "We don't," Mom said softly. "You have exigent circumstances. Destruction of evidence in progress. We saw the video." He stared at her, surprised. "You've been reading case law, too?" She's my mother, I said simply. He grinned. Fair enough. He used a crowbar from the squad trunk. The lock snapped. Inside were folders bound with rubber bands, checks, letters, spreadsheets printed in small fonts, and, at the back, an envelope with a return label from Brookfield Harbor Club. Rhodes slid on gloves, pulled it open. Inside, quarterly invoices listing dues paid for 3 names: Judge Merritt Holloway, Councilman Evers, and D.A. Martin Caro, each marked Paid in Full, Brookfield Property Owners Council. The world went quiet. Even the rain stopped pretending. That's not just conflict, Rhodes muttered. That's conspiracy. He snapped photos, sealed the papers in evidence bags, and handed me one of the labels. Keep this, kid. Chain of custody says you found it. You started this. Mom touched my shoulder. Jaylen, maybe we should go home now. Home. That word felt smaller now, like it belonged to a life that had already been evicted. We left under escort, police lights flashing against the river. I glanced back once. A figure stood 2 lanes over near Unit B200, watching. Too still to be coincidence. I caught a reflection of sunglasses. Maybe a phone. Detective? I said quickly, pointing. Rhodes turned, but the figure was gone. You saw someone? Yes, by the 2nd row. He radioed it in. Possible tail. Send a unit. The cruiser took us to the precinct, a gray block of concrete and buzzing fluorescents. They parked us in an interview room for safety. A tired officer brought us cocoa packets in styrofoam cups. You did good, Rhodes said, before leaving to brief the DA. Stay put till we say go. Mom sat with her hands around the cup, like she was trying to warm her fear away. Jay, you shouldn't have to live like this. I don't want to, I said. I just don't want them to keep getting away with it. She brushed a curl off my forehead. I keep thinking about when you were 5, reading those law books in bed. I thought it was a phase. I smiled faintly. Me too. Silence filled the space between us, gentle for once. Then a knock. The door opened. D.A. Carter stepped in, crisp suit, eyes sharp. She dropped a file on the table. We processed your video. We've confirmed time, date, and location. Halden's already lawyered up, but the judge signed a search order for all his offices. You 2 just lit a match under a rotten house. Good, I said, but my chest was tight. What about the SUV that followed us? Her jaw tightened. We're working on that. For now, you'll be placed under temporary protective watch. A hotel, not your apartment. You'll have an officer at the door until this settles. Mom nodded numbly. Carter looked at me. You're a remarkable kid, Jaylen. You realize that? Just persistent. She smiled. Persistence changes the world. Genius just gets the headlines. She started to leave, then paused. Oh, and the media's calling this the kid lawyer case. Try not to read the comments. They love you or hate you. Both will mess with your head. We were in the hotel by evening. Beige walls, floral bedspread, one window facing the parking lot. Mom was in the shower when the phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated. Answered. Hello? A pause. Then a voice I knew, low, steady, calm like ice. You've made a lot of noise, Jaylen. Mr. Halden, I said quietly, I respect intelligence, even when it's inconvenient. But you need to understand, people who dig too deep sometimes uncover things they can't bury again. I didn't respond. Let him talk. The way predators do when they're trying to fill silence with power. There are contracts older than you. Agreements that don't appear in any court docket. You think you've seen corruption, but you've only seen the appetizer. Walk away, and I'll make sure your mother gets a settlement. Enough to live anywhere she wants. You'll be a hero, not a martyr. I thought about the mold on our ceiling, about my mother fainting in a janitor's closet, about Mrs. Lopez's daughter coughing through the night. No, I said. You're sure? Yes. Then I hope, he said softly, that you understand the cost of courage. The line went dead. Mom came out of the bathroom, toweling her hair. Who was that? Wrong number, I lied, because she needed one more night of not knowing. At 1:12 a.m., the fire alarm screamed. Mom jolted upright. Red light strobed through the smoke detector. What's happening? Stay low, I said automatically. The words from a safety drill now commands. We crawled to the door. Smoke seeped under the frame. Heat pulsed from the hallway. Rhodes's voice came from somewhere below, shouting orders. Sirens wailed outside. Out the window, he yelled when he saw us. Second floor jump, I'll catch you. Mom hesitated only a second before dropping her purse and climbing onto the sill. She jumped. Rhodes caught her, rolled. I followed. The air hit me like a slap, cold and electric. Behind us, flames licked from the hotel's side corridor. Not a big fire, controlled, contained, like it wanted to send a message more than burn. Firefighters doused it fast. The official report later called it a short circuit in the vending area. But when Rhodes showed me the footage from the external cam, I saw it clearly. A figure in a hoodie slipping out the back door minutes before the alarm. A black SUV idling at the curb. No plates. Carter was furious. He's escalating, she said. We'll get him. You two stay with relatives out of town for a few days. Mom shook her head. No, if we run, he wins. I looked at her, seeing the woman who once cleaned 3 buildings a night just to pay for my school clothes. Her chin lifted. We finish this. 2 days later, the city paper ran a headline. Landlord empire collapses under child's courtroom testimony. Every tenant who'd ever lived in a Halden building suddenly remembered evidence. Complaints poured in. The DA's office set up a task force. I sat at the kitchen table of our temporary apartment, new, clean, too quiet, and spread out copies of the inspection reports Rhodes had given me. Each red dot on the map was a building with violations. There were 57, but something about the pattern nagged me. The clusters weren't random. They formed a rough ring around a section of downtown, where the city planned a luxury redevelopment project. Halden Heights. My pulse quickened. He wasn't just suing tenants, I whispered. He was clearing blocks. Mom looked up from her notebook. What do you mean? He bought condemned buildings cheap, forced families out, blamed them for the damage, collected insurance, then waited for the city to seize the land. He didn't want rent. He wanted real estate. The lawsuits were camouflage. Her eyes widened. And the officials who took his club money were fast-tracking the rezoning. I grabbed my binder. We can prove this. We have to. D.A. Carter arranged a private meeting that night. Conference room, blinds drawn, maps spread across the table. Investigators, Rhodes, Mom, me. This kid should be in grad school, one detective muttered. Carter pointed to the map. If what you're saying is true, we're not looking at landlord fraud anymore. We're looking at municipal racketeering. Can we connect Holloway or Caro? Rhodes asked. Carter nodded grimly. We already did. Their financials show investments in a shell company called North Point Holdings. Guess who the majority shareholder is? I didn't have to guess. Halden, I said. She smiled without humor. Bingo. Rhodes cracked his knuckles. So, what's next? Wiretap authorization, she said, and a warrant for all electronic communications from Halden Properties and the Brookfield Council. But we'll need a clean way in. They all looked at me. Why are you looking at me like that? I asked. Carter slid a photo across the table. Halden's office building. Sleek glass, guard desk, parking garage. He'll never suspect the kid who beat him in court, Mom gasped. Absolutely not. He's a child. I wouldn't be alone, I said slowly, feeling the gears click. If he's arrogant enough, he'll talk. He already called me once. He thinks I'll break. Carter studied me. You're sure? I thought about every family still coughing in their moldy apartments. Yes. 3 days later, under supervision, I met Halden again. Public cafe downtown, cameras on every corner, Carter's team wired into the booth behind me. He arrived late, wearing the same calm as always. Jaylen, he greeted, sliding into the seat across from me. No hard feelings? I guess that depends, I said. He stirred his coffee. You think you've won something, but you only exposed a few termites. The house still stands. Then maybe it needs to fall, I said quietly. He laughed. You sound like an activist. Be careful. Activists get tired. I leaned forward. Did you pay the judge and the DA through North Point Holdings? For a second, just one, he froze. Then he smiled. Where did you hear that name? Public records, I said. You should really lock your filing cabinets. His gaze sharpened. You're clever. But clever doesn't survive long in this city. Power does. And power, he said, lowering his voice, is not in the courtroom. It's in control. Control of what? Who stays? Who leaves? Who gets to call a block home? He leaned back. You'll understand when you're older, if you make it. He left cash on the table and walked out. Carter's team followed, documenting every word. Later, the transcript became Exhibit 91 in State vs. Halden et al. It was enough. The raids came at dawn. News helicopters hovered over Halden's mansion. Officers hauled boxes, computers, hard drives. Judge Holloway resigned for health reasons. Councilman Evers fled to Florida. D.A. Caro was indicted within the week. Halden himself was arrested outside Brookfield Harbor Club. Cameras caught everything. The handcuffs, the flashbulbs, his expression finally cracking. When the news aired that night, Mom cried silently. I just sat there, staring. The fight that had filled every corner of my life suddenly had nowhere left to go. Months later, in a packed federal courtroom, United States vs. Victor J. Halden reached its end. I wasn't allowed to testify because of my age, but Carter read excerpts from my filings into the record. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, racketeering, bribery, conspiracy, obstruction. The sentence, 25 years without parole. Judge Pierce, now promoted to the appellate bench, presided. When she looked down from the bench and saw me in the front row, she smiled just once. Justice, she said in her closing remarks, sometimes needs a smaller voice to speak louder truth. Our life changed slowly. Then, all at once, the city established the Ward Legal Aid Fund to help tenants fight unlawful evictions. Mom went back to school for social work, part-time. She started sleeping again. I still read law books, but now in daylight. Sometimes kids from the building came over, and I taught them chess or how to write letters to their landlords. When the local paper asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said, older, but not quieter. One evening, months after the trial, we walked by the river, the same stretch near lockbox storage. The warehouses had been cleared. Someone was painting murals on the brick, bright blues and golds, families smiling. Mom stopped, staring at the water. You were supposed to have a childhood, Jay. I still do, I said. It just looks different. She laughed softly. Different how? I get to live in a world that might finally be fair. That's worth a lot. The wind carried her sigh away. You really think it'll stay fair? I looked at the water. No, but now I know how to fight when it isn't. A week later, a plain envelope arrived. No returns address. Inside, a handwritten note. You fought well, kid. But wars don't end, they pause. Remember that. No signature. Just a single initial. V. Mom wanted to hand it to the police. I told her to let it be. Because if Halden was behind bars, someone else wrote it. Maybe a partner we hadn't found yet. Maybe a warning. Either way, it reminded me of something I'd read once in a dusty old casebook. Justice is a verb. You have to keep doing it. A year later, I stood on the steps of the courthouse, taller now, my tie less crooked. Reporters gathered again, but this time for a celebration. The launch of the Ward Youth Legal Initiative, a program teaching middle school students how to understand their rights. Judge Pierce cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed. Mom whispered, "You ready for this?" I smiled. I've been ready since Rule 17. The crowd laughed. As the ceremony ended, a little girl tugged my sleeve. "Mr. Jaylen, can kids really make a difference?" I knelt so we were eye level. We're the only ones who ever do. That night, back home, I took the old blue binder from under my bed, the one with coffee stains and frayed tabs. Inside were the photos, the letters, the first motion stamped "Received." I traced my finger over the date. Everything started with a rule no one expected a kid to know. Outside, the city lights glowed on the river. Somewhere, another child was reading, trying to understand why grown-ups made rules that hurt people like them. I hoped they'd find my name one day and think, if he could do it, maybe I can too. Because courage isn't about being fearless. It's about standing up when you're small and the world tells you to sit down. And if you ever forget that, remember, one voice, no matter how young, can make a courtroom and a whole country listen.